This is Caffeinated Risk, the podcast for security professionals by security professionals. Here are your two self-proclaimed grumpy security guys, Tim McCreet and Doug Leese.
Welcome, folks, to Season 5 of Caffeinated Risk. Our next podcast guest is Rachel Hayward, the recently appointed Executive Director of Cyber Alberta. Rachel is a recognized leader in privacy and information security, well known on the Alberta speaking circuit. She is a passionate advocate for women in IT, fostering relationships and uniting diverse perspectives to achieve common goals. She brings her extensive experience in cybersecurity and privacy to the Cyber Alberta team in her role as Executive Director for Cyber Alberta. The Cyber Alberta team also received the Premier's Award of Excellence in 2024. Her recent roles include serving on the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology's Cybersecurity Program Advisory Committee, while also lecturing at NATE and acting as a privacy and technology law expert for private industry. Rachel has also served over 12 years with the Alberta Privacy Commissioner's Office, with more than 6 of those as their Director of Compliance and Special Investigations. She holds a master's degree in public administration and several technical designations, including the C-Risk, and was awarded a Fellow in Privacy by the International Association of Privacy Professionals. And now, let's check out our latest podcast with Rachel Hayward.
And welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. Long-time listener, long-time subscriber, first time invited on the podcast.
Welcome. I'd love to hear that people are listening. I mean, that's kind of why we do this. Yeah. There's so many angles and problems in the cybersecurity space. Who do we know that knows something about a piece of it, and then how do we bring the whole thing together? And you're bringing a brand new angle to it again. How is the government dealing with risk management and cyber?
Yeah, there's a lot going on. That's for sure.
So can you walk us through, one, how did you end up where you are? And the second one is, now that you're with the Cyber Alberta team, what does that look like for you, and what are some of the things that you folks are doing?
Sure. So I love the question of how did you get where you are, because it's been an interesting ride, I think. Way back about 2,000 years ago, when I went to university, I studied political science, and then I went to grad school and studied public administration. And during that time, my fascination was really around security. And a lot of it was more physical security. But I had the opportunity to be a teaching assistant in what I think is the most exciting class that you'll ever encounter. And it was called Spies, Lies, and Espionage.
Yes.
And it was fascinating. Yeah, it really sort of opened my eyes to the real relationships between governments and between countries, and just how that interaction works more than just what you hear in the news, right? It was more about like how those relationships build on themselves. And I really kind of kept that in the back of my mind as something that, one day I want to get back to. But I was really fortunate, and this will come back to some more conversations around Cyber Alberta, but I was really fortunate to be in a grad program that offered a co-op program.
Oh, okay.
And I had the best opportunity, I say as well. Again, really, really fortunate. I was one of 10 people, including the deputy minister, in a department called the Office of Information Technology for the Government of Manitoba.
Okay.
So there was 10 of us. One was the deputy minister. One was the assistant deputy minister. We had some consultants and, students working on it. So I had this amazing opportunity where I had a real hand into the building and the development of the security policy for the government of Manitoba at the time. I mean, what a great opportunity, and what a great insight into tech for the first time, and trying to build that out and trying to communicate it out to a government that, wasn't really ready to hear those kinds of messages, which I think we're still dealing with today, right, to some degree. So fast forward from that, I really loved the idea of security, and this gave me a little bit more of that hands-on feel. And then I ended up in privacy, and I thought privacy and security are a natural fit. These are two groups that should be talking together. And I have to tell you, I'm still fighting that fight. Nobody believes me.
You know what? I think I took enough trips to your folks' office that we had to find common ground.
I think at the end of the day, it's about protecting the needs of people, and in the case of government, it's protecting the needs and the rights of citizens. I think if your information is shared publicly, if it's widely available, you do lose the right to privacy, which is a fundamental right in this country. And the same goes for working for the commissioner's office as well, which I spent 10 years or a little bit more working for them, protecting those rights and very much looking at the security and how we were able to physically protect information across the province and in private sector as well. And then this opportunity became available as executive director for Cyber Alberta. And if I can just pause and tell you one more chance where I've been really fortunate is I really believe I have the best job in the world. Yeah. I really do. I get to work on the leading edge technology in the government. We get to help push and effect real change in ways that I think protect Albertans. And it's one of those unsung hero type roles in many ways because we do all this work and when we do it well, no one hears about us. Mm-hmm. Yep. But I take real comfort knowing that that the division as a whole does really, really important work. And then moving to Cyber Alberta specifically, we have a number of different arms, but if we are to separate them maybe into two big groups or two sections, I would say the first one is very outward looking. We spend a lot of time working with Alberta small, medium, and really large organizations to provide information, to share information, to collect information, to learn about what the landscape is like in Alberta and what security problems that businesses are facing. So we spend a lot of time with that. And then the other side, of course, of what we do is we do a lot of threat intel and threat intel reporting. And we try very hard to make it Alberta specific. So we generally don't report on things that we haven't seen or heard of happening in Alberta. So we provide that unique lens of this is actually happening here.
Right.
We also try and provide it in different languages. So we provide that technical expertise, but we also try and provide, especially in something that we call our Cyber Minute, we also provide information in a way that you can take up to others that might not have a technical background, because I think that that's really, really important. And in my experience, in my time working with a lot of different technical people, the one holdback, the reason why they don't get the funding, why they don't get the buy-in is because people are at the table speaking very different languages. So we try and bridge that gap as well. There's a lot of different things that we're working on, but the last thing that I will say and mention is we have a work experience program where we've had running for a couple of years. Right now we have 8 positions that run through internally for a 2-year time commitment where recent grads come in and work with the government for 2 years in all the different areas of cyber. And then after that, they can move on to other roles. They have that very necessary 2 years experience. Because when you come out of school, every job needs, at least 2 years experience. Yeah. So we've been working with that. And then we're now taking that to the next level where we're trying to develop an apprenticeship program. So something that you see with the trades. Mm-hmm. We're actually trying to implement something like that for cybersecurity. And as you can imagine, that's a bit of a long road. That's something quite unique to Alberta. But we're very focused on being able to do that so people can work in cybersecurity while they're learning. A real benefit for students, but also real benefit for organizations, large, medium, small, I think.
I'm happy to hear that we're trying to address the real world element of this. I've been fortunate. We've had a couple of students come through my area that were brought in as co-ops, and they got a chance to work with us, and a lot of stuff seems to happen to us, so they get a lot of practical experience, and it's usually because we're moving fast. And every once in a while I'll tease, I bet you they never showed you this in school or that in school. And not to be cheeky, I mean, having had to help develop curriculum, it's just as hard on the school side. But how do we find what businesses really need and then bring people in so that by the time they're done the official school, like you say, they're already useful, but they're also confident that they can do the work? Because I think it's got to be pretty terrifying being brand new in this industry.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And the reality is in a lot of schooling, you'll learn one particular piece of software to do a particular thing, and then you'll never find anybody hiring who uses the same software. You might understand the concepts, but you need to relearn. And you know that all the software, the vendors, they're constantly changing now. And for curriculum to keep up with something like that is really challenging. Nate has a fantastic, and I'm going to sound biased here, but cybersecurity program, a post-diploma program. And I helped build some of the curriculum for those as well. And it is a challenge to find ways to actually meet the specific needs of business. I think that apprenticeship is one of those ways where you're constantly tapped into what business actually needs because of the relationship that you have to have between the businesses and the post-secondary institutions. So I think that that's one realistic way. From a Cyber Alberta perspective, I'll say one of the things that we've committed to is making sure that we're always asking questions about the information that we provide. Is it what you're looking for? Are you looking for more technical deep dives into some of these reports? Are you looking for more information that you can easily just dispel and provide to your C-suite executives? And anything in between, what is it that's missing? It's not necessarily curriculum-based, but I think at the end of the day, that's what we need to be doing. And apprenticeship programs naturally do that well because of that deep connection.
But I think apprenticeship programs for things like learning how to wire up a house or fix a car, you get better at it because you're actually doing it versus reading a book about it or talking about it. Have we looked into why apprenticeship hasn't really taken off in fields like engineering and cyber?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. It's probably one better answered by somebody working in the advanced ed department than myself.
Oh, no, I understand. Have you heard rumors from the other side, from the industry?
I think, I also know that there are some regulations originally written out around how and when apprenticeship-style programs could be developed. And that's changed recently in Alberta, making it much more accessible to build those types of programs. So I think that there are some reasons why it hasn't happened in the past. And now what I think the real hurdle is getting people past the idea of what they think traditional apprenticeship style programs are, such as, those real hands-on, really important work, really important hands-on work. And moving that idea to something that's broader and something that is about, you can spend 6 months learning in a classroom and then 6 months on the job learning practically. You've learned in concept what all of these things mean. So now let's take your knowledge of vulnerability assessments or, risk management or whatever it is, and let's actually see how it works in the real world. And translate some of that. So I hope that we'll continue to see more apprenticeship programs. Post-secondary education is expensive. What a great way to help fund it as well for students who don't want to shell out the thousands and thousands of dollars for that degree.
We looked at this years ago, and we were part of that group that kind of ran into that wall where this whole idea of an apprenticeship, it didn't fall, or what we were looking at almost, it's almost 10 years ago. When we looked at it back then, it didn't fall within the framework of what is an actual apprentice program. But what I like that you folks have done and what, Doug, what your company's doing as well is you're bringing in folks who have already expressed an interest, who are in a curriculum, who are working through a program. And now it's a chance to actually follow through, get that practical experience. Because that's the one thing that we haven't done well, probably in the last 20 years or so, is given folks who are coming out of the academic route to understand cybersecurity, that practical exposure.
Yeah, and I think there's something else that's missing in this conversation as well, and it's maybe it's something that we need to think about delicately, and I might not always be the most delicate speaker, but I think that we need to look beyond the fact if somebody's brand new and they won't know how to act in a work environment, and there's so much work involved, and there's so much training involved, and I think people often get put off at the idea of having somebody who hasn't worked in a work environment before and thinking about the training and the mentoring. But I like to challenge that and say, but if you bring anyone into government or a large organization that has not worked in a large organization or has not worked in government before, if you want them to succeed, it doesn't matter at what level you're bringing them in. They need a mentor or somebody they can reach out to find out where policies and processes are, to find out what you wear when you speak to executive, just all of the same kinds of things. We should be setting everybody up for success. And then along those lines is when you're bringing people right out of school, they're often very, very excited to try and implement the things that they've learned in school. Yep. There's an enthusiasm there. There's I want to pick this up and actually read about this over the weekend, kind of an attitude. And I'm not saying that those of us who have been out in the workforce for some time don't necessarily have that. But I think that real zest for what it is they're doing, I think sometimes that's more important than 10 or 15 years of experience.
I've been using it a lot lately. There's a parable about an elephant that wanders through a village, and there's 6 blind people that are trying to assess what this thing is. That's your average business problem. And everybody's looking at one end of the elephant and coming to a conclusion, right?
Yeah.
The longer you do this, the more easy it is to see, yeah, we're still doing it. How do we get out of that?
Yeah, there you go. That's a good question.
Is it remedial? Like, do we send everybody to Toastmasters? I remember watching that boss for a day thing where they send the boss out into the field to do stuff.
Maybe.
Maybe we should send the cyber people out to the field to do things, right? Yeah.
I don't think it's I don't think it's remedial or going back and taking going through the Toastmasters, because they'll still be presenting. They'll present very well, but they'll present at a very technical level. Yeah. And what we need to do, I think, fundamentally, is when you come together with different groups, and cyber's just one of them who has a mission and a need to get certain things done. I think there needs to be some very basic elemental conversations at the beginning. What is it that we actually need to do? You need to implement this program. I need to make sure it's safe, and keep working back to what those issues are. And then when there are areas of conflict, I think there needs to be a point where you pause and you try and explain what the other person is trying to say. And then you recognize that you were way off base and you didn't understand what legal needed after all anyway. Yeah. So I think there's some basic, and this goes back to the relationship thing, doesn't it? It goes back to if you feel comfortable with the people in the room, you're more comfortable to say things like, this is what I'm hearing. And then they're more likely saying, no, that's not at all what I'm talking about. You're just looking at the let's say the front end of the elephant, right? Yeah. You're only looking at the what's in it for me. But in order for us to actually implement this program or provide this service, we have to look at the whole elephant to see where the risks are, right?
Agreed. And
the elephant didn't go very well along that line, but I tried.
It was good. I like it. Oh, it was good.
Yeah, it's a fascinating parable because they were all very convinced that they knew what this was.
Yeah, I do think that's a real issue in communication for all people, but especially for those of us in cyber. We get so concerned when we start hearing things like, well, two-factor doesn't work, and for this particular software, two-factor doesn't work, or we're going to skip the threat risk assessment because we don't have time, or, things like that. And then that becomes the only thing that we focus on is not only do we have a process and there's a requirement for a threat risk assessment, but now we can't quantify the risk. We don't know what we need need to do in order to fix this, because you're not giving us the information that we need.
Yeah.
It goes back to that fundamental. We need to make sure that everybody's on the same page early on in the conversation. And the other thing I think is quite interesting is, and I'm sure you've seen this before as well, is there's this concern over sharing information about a project or a program. And it's like, well, they don't need to know this. Well, I don't need to tell them why we're using this, why we chose this software. That's probably a more apt example. Security doesn't need to know why we chose this software. They just need to know we've chosen it. They probably need the background so that they understand why this one has to be the one that's used, why it works better with other systems. Maybe it integrates better. There could be other reasons. And providing people with more information is better, I think, than just here's the software we chose. You go do your job and then come back and tell us when it's done.
Yeah. I think that's every bad weekend I've ever had in my career. So yeah. Yeah. And do you know what? It's like flashbacks now, because one of the things that has bothered me for years, and I kind of wanted to ask you both, is should we look at building that universal translator so that we can actually talk between business and legal? And it's just, there's got to be a way to find that common ground. And I don't know whether a taxonomy is the way to go, or so that everyone understands the concept of risk and what that means. But does everyone understand the business goals and objectives? Can anyone in the room, and I ask this a lot now, can anyone in the room actually walk me through the mission, vision, goals, and objectives of the organization? And can you do it in a minute or less? Because I can explain ESRM on a napkin in a bar in less than a minute. Can you explain what your business does and why you exist in a minute or less? Because if you can't, shouldn't we start with that? And then can we work through the rest of it? Because I'm going back to that whole Star Trek Universal Translator thing, but really that's the thing. It's you both kind of hit it. In that one room, there could be 11 different conversations and they're all going a different space. And there could be that one elephant, but touched 11 times. And no one's coming to that one point yet. So I'm desperately looking for that way to get to that path where we can translate. So,
and I want to challenge and push back a little bit on what you said. And this might be a little controversial, but I dare you to check it out in your own organizations. I don't think that enough people know what risk is. I think they get it confused with other things.
That's fair.
And so
with a threat or this is a problem or absolutely.
Yeah. I've even heard it confused with vulnerabilities and others. And I think maybe starting the conversation off, I think you're 100% right, is what's our mission? Why are we here? Does this support our values? And why is it that we're doing this? I think those conversations are important. I also think it's really important when cyber gets involved in a new initiative is saying, okay, so we're here. Part of what we need to do here is to assess the risk of the program and help you understand what those risks are so that you're comfortable in signing off. And this is what risk means for us, right? Yep. This is how we evaluate risk, and make that really clear, provide them with examples related to the software. I think that we need to repeatedly have those conversations, because a lot of business areas, like you think about marketing or other business areas, what you might find is that they spend very little time thinking about risk. I think that's the reality. So if you don't think about it more than, once or twice a year, you're not as honed in on what it actually means for the organization and the level of risk that organization is willing to take. Because some organizations have really high risk levels, whereas others are very, very low. And making sure that we're including that as part of the conversation, I think it's really important.
Yeah, I like that, Rachel. Yeah, I really do. And so it's funny because I was at a conference not that long ago and I was presenting on ESRM, imagine. And somebody in the crowd got to the mic and asked a question. And they said, Tim, how do you define risk? And I said, it's been the same definition for 20 years. It's the effect of uncertainty on objectives. And the room got like deadly quiet. And I finished off and got off the stage. And about 4 or 5 people hung around and go, that's the first time someone's defined risk. And I'm like, oh, mother of God, this has got to stop. And I'm like, all right. So, but you're right. It's if I know the business and I know what the effect of that objective could be if a risk occurs, then I can actually have a meaningful discussion with somebody down the road. But right now, I think those 2 parts of the puzzle are missing. Folks don't get what we're supposed to do every day because they may not know the full mission, vision, goals, and objectives. Or this idea that a risk is actually an impact on an objective. And if you keep it that simple, my mom even understands that. And she's 84. She's got that. Like, she knows what my son looks at risk, and that's what she tells people now, because she never understood the cyber stuff. She couldn't get that. But so now she actually says she can actually explain what I do, which is pretty awesome. But what if we just had those two conversations every time we started a meeting about a new project or a new objective or a new mission, or we're branching off into Southeast Asia for manufacturing? Could we have those discussions first? And I'm hoping, I think Cyber Alberta can actually drive those discussions in the Alberta market, because we haven't had that ever. No one's actually taken the time at a government level to explain that and the impact it has, and how everyone, small, medium, large business, is impacted by this. Right?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the really exciting things that we have with Cyber Alberta is the ability to connect and communicate and share information. But share information not just at that conference level where you hear someone speak, you listen, you take a few notes, and then you go, right?
Yeah.
It's more about having regular interactions and being able to help reinforce ideas and share information. Even just sharing information about incidents that have happened. I think that's one of the most important things that we do is we host and we have monthly online meetings that over 200 people attend those, which is absolutely crazy.
That's great.
And in those meetings, if we've had a member who's come forward and told us that they've recently experienced an incident, and if they're willing to speak to our membership, they talk about the specifics. They talk about the IOCs and what happened and what they're doing to change it to reduce their risk in the future. We get to have all those conversations now, and in the future, I very much want to see ways in which we can communicate more regularly than just our monthly meetings. We have monthly meetings. We also have quarterly workshops or quarterly more hands-on sessions that are a couple of hours, and those are also attended by at least 150 people. So we're able to get people together and to start sharing and learning from each other. And just when we have our members speak out about an incident, what I personally have found is then I'll have 5 or 10 people from our membership reach out directly to me and say, hey, can you connect us? Because I really want to talk to them. Or more importantly, I want them to come and talk to our board about their experience, because maybe our board will listen now. Right. So it's I think it's really invaluable to have those conversations, and for us to be able to guide and start pushing some consistency out, some frameworks out, some ability to benchmark against like organizations within Alberta. That's where we start to get real traction, and we can actually build a stronger, safer province by being able to do this. And, I'm happy to say that I dropped into an organization that is pushing that envelope. And I think that so far we've been quite successful with lots of pretty exciting plans for the next year to keep that moving forward.
It's interesting you mentioned benchmarking. I have mixed feelings.
All right. yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
What a shock. But I like the idea of knowing how we're doing. Sometimes if you're at the front, well, we're going to stop investing at that then because we're doing better than our peers. Do we think there should be at least it doesn't matter that you're better than them, you're all still below where we need you to be to protect our critical infrastructure, for example?
Yep.
Benchmarking tends to be used as a way to either justify or defer funding. But also, if a company doesn't have the money, enforcing a regulation to say thou shalt, then it's a disincentive to do business here. So you're kind of darned if you do and darned if you don't, right? And
so I think so. I agree with you that it's not a perfect world when we start benchmarking. But if I can just take this conversation a little bit broader for a moment, just to
please.
Talk about one of the things that I think is critically important that we get at Cyber Alberta, so we can better provide the right resourcing. Is we need to better understand what the landscape actually looks like in Alberta. We see all kinds of stats and information about the U.S. We do see some great stats about Canada. CCCS puts out some great stats about Canada. But when you ask, can you drill down at a provincial level? The answer is always no. It's not statistically significant. We need to actually understand how bad things are here, how good things are here. We need to have some understanding so that we can, so from a government perspective, we can make sure we're funding the right things. So when we talk about cyber safe programs, one of the other things, because we're so busy at Cyber Alberta, one of the other things we're doing is a cyber safe program where we will in the next 12 months, probably less, start speaking to seniors groups and other vulnerable populations about cybersecurity. So we're actually going to go out and do that. But we need information to be able to assess how bad and what areas we need to work on. We know that there were over 12,000 fraud reports last year alone in Alberta, but we can't define what that fraud is. I'm sure a lot of that is online fraud.
Yep.
And then a lot of those things like sextortion and a lot of other online frauds were probably never reported. So it's a challenge for us to get that information, but we do need to start finding ways to get that so we can better support our community as a whole. The more informed all of our vulnerable populations are, the more informed our small, medium, and large businesses are as well, the better off we are as a province. And so when I think about that information broadly, that's what I'm thinking about. And this is critically important to me, that we're able to clearly articulate what the problem is in Alberta and how we can target our resources to best meet those needs. And then when it comes to benchmarking, maybe the way to look at it is the services and the frameworks that we're looking to build will be available to our membership initially.
Yep.
I should also say any Alberta business can, or a business with some kind of basis in Alberta can become a member of Cyber Alberta, and it's free. But any organization can use those tools. We will be looking at ways in which we can collect some of that data anonymously, not based on the organization, but maybe based on the organization's size, so that we can provide some benchmarking. But then it's not like the organization would be telling the cybersecurity folks to do it. It's more like the cybersecurity folks are receiving this information directly from us. So then they can probably choose when to use it. If we're the only organization that reported that says that we're not using two-factor authentication, to use that example again, then maybe they finally get the traction that they need to start implementing that. So I understand that sometimes it can be, we're average, we're good. We don't need to do anything else.
We're good enough, right? So,
we don't need to hire that. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to outrun the bear, just your buddy.
Correct. Yeah.
So maybe just kind of wrapping up here. What could a business do if they're trying to set some goals and some plans in motion for the next year or two? Not fix their cyber problems, but help them better understand their risks so they're treating them appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good question. I'm going to keep it at a fairly basic, let's get to know what we have level. The first thing I would do is understand what vendors you're working with and make sure you know what those vendors have access to and how they're integrated into your network. I think that's really, really important. And then as those things change, is that it's being tracked somewhere so that you know if you are impacted by a breach you've heard on the news pretty quickly, because maybe that organization hasn't had a chance to reach out to you yet.
Yes.
You are better informed. I think the first thing you can do when it comes to cyber is to start to be better informed and start to learn about what you have internally, and then start looking externally. In looking internally, creating those lists, understanding what your vendors are and what they have access to, I think is a first step, and that doesn't cost any extra money. That's a time and resources thing. And that's, I think, a very practical way to start. And then after that, that's when we start building out externally and we start looking at how we can, maybe reduce some of the risks that we were able to identify because we have so many vendors with very loose contracts or, things like that. Start tightening up some of those contracts, start setting some expectations that you have with vendors. And again, these things are not necessarily going to cost you extra. I think when we start the cybersecurity journey, we spend a lot of time worrying about the costs related to it. And there's a lot we can do before we have to start purchasing extra products just to get ourselves ready. Because no matter what, no matter how hard we work, no matter how hard we build the security, we're always going to have risk associated with this. And it's best to understand where that risk is coming from.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity. I really had fun this afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the latest podcast from Caffeinated Risk. Make sure you visit our website, caffeinatedrisk.com, to stay up to date on what we've been working on. Our website has bios of our podcast guests, posts about topics we're passionate about, and even a library of reference material we find valuable in the work we do every day. And don't forget to subscribe to Caffeinated Risk on your favorite podcast service. This way, you'll be notified when we release our next podcast, and you can listen to our previous guests just in case you missed them. Thanks so much for listening to Caffeinated Risk.